My speedrun map named Parkour Speedrun was based on various death run maps that required parkouring through an obstacle course with various traps and tricks along the way. When testing various maps including 150 plus Easy Death Run by Yuri and Parkour Splash Out by JKR Julian, I was stuck on almost every checkpoint most of the time since the game was so hard that I had to skip many sections. So I simply used ready-made prefabs and of parkour stages including path, peg, ice, bounce and rail platforms that I arranged into a linear death run, and at a time I made it a speed run. The timer was set to 30 minutes to give some leeway in terms of finishing the level in time. The map used a large grid environment as the basic foundation. Various devices and traps were added to increase the difficulty by surprising and challenging the player. Weapons, chests, and galleries were not needed as they were collectibles and decorations, and only prefabs, devices, and consumables were applied. There is an option to skip certain parts of the level by cheesing it or cutting corners, and some sections do not have to be played. I tried to make the map simple but not overly difficult, with checkpoint spawners that are dispersed close together. It was intended to be an obstacle training course with a sporting attitude, removing the need for weapons and fighting, but violence is still present in the form of traps and elimination zones. The map represents both mastery and performativity in terms of its speed play by platforming through dangerous areas and memorizing the level. I used Fortnite's creative mode to create my map on the Epic Games launcher as well as my PlayStation 4, then recorded and edited it on Share Factory to share the video on YouTube. The MDA framework is present in my level based on the paper MDA, a formal approach to game design and game research by Robin Hanek, Mark LeBlanc, and Robert Zubek. Mechanics are demonstrated with the controls by moving the character with an analog stick or directional keys and jumping with the spacebar or allocated button. Using weapons, pickaxes or building materials has been prohibited in the game as there is no need for it in a speedrun. Other mechanics include touching the ground outside the platforms to cause instant death, walls that shoot poison darts, jumping on bounce platforms to reach higher heights, and spikes that activate when the player touches it after a few seconds. There are platforms that turn the player's feet into ice blocks to make players slip off the stage, ice platforms that are just slippery, and there are platforms that push the player forward or enhance their speed. Checkpoints are aligned with collectible coins to indicate a sense of direction for the player to activate them. The trigger zone at the end of the level is also marked by a giant coin, and electrical railings damage the player or push them from platforms. Dynamics include timing jumps or dashing to gain momentum and cross over platforms, dodging obstacles that are dangerous, and jumping or running at the right time. Increase difficulty when jumping, trying to balance slippery platforms, and using checkpoints to your advantage by finding them. There are steps, walls, railings, and small platforms that will offer parkour opportunities and keep the player within the confines of the level. The game is still moderately difficult, where there is a lot of respawning at checkpoints. There are time indicators with sound effects, countdown at the starting point, and victory screens when the level or timer is complete. Aesthetics include sensation demonstrated in the music created by a radio device that plays exploration music, sound effects for satisfaction, visuals in terms of graphics, and interactivity such as control vibration, UI effects, and dialogue. Another is challenge with platforming, memorizing, and speedrunning the map to receive the best time and submission through an entertaining, intensive experience that immerses players in the game as a pastime. These concepts of the MDA framework demonstrate the analysis and consumption of games to influence the player's experience, as mechanics generate dynamics which in turn creates aesthetics. At the beginning of the game, there are on-screen instructions telling the player how to complete the obstacle course by collecting coins and finishing the level in 30 minutes. The difficulty curve would steadily increase when reaching the end of the level, where obstacles and traps would be repeated for the player to learn its behavior. The map is very linear, so there is some sense of direction demonstrated in the layout, which is more intended for a single player to test their skills. At the 30 and 15 second mark, clock sound effects would play, indicating the timer is reaching its end before taking the player to the game over screen, which indicated the time to complete the level, time alive, and any other status left. The level offers a challenge to players who can receive a high score in terms of time for reaching the end of the obstacle course. Spectators will witness the core mechanics in play, as well as dynamics and aesthetics, and they will be immersed visually rather than physically in the game experience. Playtesters found my level a bit too long and difficult to play within the time limit, but it was still completable by them. Accessibility design for players and spectators includes entertaining and sharing the gameplay experience visually through audio and physical engagement. Players will easily get the hang of the game, but it might take a few tries to progress through the checkpoints. However, spectators will not be able to experience the difficulty interactively or gameplay firsthand, so they might need some dialogue, visuals, or audio feedback to demonstrate the player's emotions and sensations.